Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to Miss Anarchist 2016.
Sassy girl. I'm a sassy girl. I'm a sassy girl. I'm a sassy girl. I'm a sassy girl. Baby, you know that I'm the star of the show. Come on up and show me, 'cause I'm ready to go. Show me some love, 'cause I'm gonna explode. Just because I'm sassy from my head to my toe.
Please welcome our judges, Caitlin, Catherine, and Chris. And also welcome our beautiful contestants. This beautiful man is named Johannes Caspar Schmidt, more commonly known as Max Stirner, a German philosopher who wrote The Ego and Its Own in 1844 and had big impacts on individualist anarchism. And here is the fabulous Mikhail Bakunin, the man behind collectivist anarchism. He's a man of the world, traveling and being exiled all across Europe. You may know him for God and the State, a best-selling hit. And I mean, his beard is Gucci. Another equally handsome man is William Godwin, the father of philosophical anarchism, most famous for his mystery novel Things as They Are and Inquiry Concerning Political Justice. Now introducing the first man to call himself an anarchist, it's the gorgeous Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, France's very own sweetheart, taking anarchy by storm with the assertion that property is theft. You can purchase his novel, What is Property, at your local printing press. And last but not least, Anselm Bellagaria, author of the first known anarchist manifesto. You may also recognize him for his participation in the French Revolution of 1848. Unfortunately, he will not be joining us today because he got food poisoning backstage. Now it's time for our formal wear competition. First question, what are your opinions on human nature?
Humans have the ability to be perfected. Once science and education progress further, the need for government will become obsolete. As the human race becomes more enlightened and we realize that we can survive without a mass capital Gary hanging over us and watching our every move, we will be in a better place.
You know, I would urge everyone to think for themselves. I believe that self-interest is the cause of an individual's every action. I love men too, not merely individuals, but every one of them. I love them with the consciousness of egoism. I love them because loving makes me happy. I love because loving is natural to me, because it pleases me. You see, all individuals are unique and should reject any attempts to restrict or deny their uniqueness.
Man is not inherently bad. I quote myself in saying, human nature is so constituted that the propensity for evil is always intensified by external circumstances, and the morality of the individual depends much more on the conditions of his existence and the environment in which he lives than on his own will. The people who think man is inherently bad only see that because of his terrible circumstances in our current situation.
I'm no optimist, you see. Not like Marx. As much as I'd like for the world to be reconstructed in a utopian light, the inconvenient reality is that man has a constant, unchangeable nature, and change cannot be brought about so easily. Egoism is inevitable in mankind, but so is moral conscience, the awareness of his weakness. It is this, as well as man's will to work, that defines him. Changing human nature is no simple task.
Question 2. What are your thoughts on the current state of government?
Government is oppressive. It is the cause of all restrictions. The common people, nay, the innocent people, are being dictated by their so-called superiors who don't know any better. To be governed is to be watched, inspected, spied upon, directed, law-driven, numbered, regulated, enrolled, indoctrined, preached at, controlled, checked, estimated, valued, censured, commanded by creatures who have neither the right, nor the wisdom, nor the virtue to do so. To be governed is to be at every operation, at every transaction noted, registered, counted, taxed, stamped, measured, numbered, assessed, licensed, authorized, admonished, prevented, forbidden, reformed, corrected, or punished. It is under the pretext of public utility and in the name of general interest to be placed under contribution, drilled, fleeced, exploited, monopolized, and extorted from. That is government, is justice, is that it is morality.
It's an abomination, as mentioned in my new mystery novel out in stores today. The aristocratic privilege shows how tyrannical our current government system is, and the abuse that the elite of society place on the middle and lower class. Above all, we should not forget that government is an evil, a usurpation upon the private judgment and individual conscience of mankind.
I think that our government's views are taking away the uniqueness of individuals. Amongst these is the abstraction of man, into which all unique individuals are submerged and lost. Man, you see, is not a person, but an ideal, a spook.
Question 3. If you could change things, who, if anyone, should be in charge?
People can run their community by themselves if the elite of society would just give them the chance. We should be free from social organization in way of progressive enlightenment and feed the lack of political, social, and economic deficiencies. Make man wise, and by the very operation you make them free. Civil liberty follows as the consequences of this. No usurped power can stand against the authority of opinion.
I don't believe in any authority with power. However, I recognize all natural authority and all of its influence of fact upon us, but none of its right. I quote my book, God and the State, in saying, only a great and omnipotent authority, at once natural and rational, the only one we respect, will be that of the collective and public spirit of a society founded on equality and solidarity and the mutual respect of all of its members. Does it follow that I reject authority? Perish the thought. In the matter of boots, I defer to the authority of the bootmaker. I don't even accept Marx's theory of the dictatorship of the proletariat because inevitably, if you took the most ardent revolutionary, vested him in absolute power, within a year he would be worse than the Tsar himself.
I think that if we could have an alternative organization of society, our civilization would be much better. As more and more people become egoists, conflict in society would decrease as each individual recognizes the uniqueness of others. This ensures a suitable environment in which they can cooperate or find truces which I term union of egoists. Only under self-management can all participate in the affairs of the union and express their individuality. Non-hierarchical, and everyone would be equal in power. That line doesn't make
Man should be in charge of himself, especially when it comes to the work he puts in and what he gets in return for that work. I believe in a social contract of sorts, but not of that between authoritarian figures and the proletariat. You can think of it as a spontaneous order, a system in which man governs himself based on a mutually agreed arrangement of his fellow man, without coercion or hierarchy. You see, the idea of contract excludes that of government. Between contracting parties, there is not necessarily a real personal interest for each. A man bargains with the aim of securing his liberty and his revenue at the same time.
Now a word from our sponsors.
Miss Anarchist is brought to you by Islamism. Like anarchism, there's disagreement on whether or not to use violence to achieve your ideological goals. Anarchists may or may not use violence against the state or institutions in an attempt to dissolve private production and government. Similarly, there's a divide in Islam on whether or not violence should be used in the holy war. Jihad can be split into two groups. Greater jihad is the internal struggle for self-perfection and against sin, and lesser jihad is the outer conflict against individuals who do not believe in the Quran. Different groups interpret the Quran in radically different ways, such as a sect of radical Sunni Islamists that interpret the Quran in a way that advocates violence for the pursuit of lesser jihad. In their ideology, violence is justified under their code of Sharia law. Similarly, all anarchists have different views on whether or not violence is justified. Mikhail Bakunin did not reject violence and believed it was justified in some situations, which was reiterated in his idea of the propaganda of the deed, but William Godwin believed violence was never justified under any circumstances to achieve their goal.
Welcome back. Question 4. What subtype of anarchism do you think you fit best with?
I am most certainly collectivist. In fact, some call me the father of collectivist anarchism. I believe in the eradication of the current means of production, and instead, dispensement in order with the hours of labor worked. Production should be in the hands of the producers and not any sort of private institution.
Consider myself to be more individualistic than collective. I advocate for free association and reject violent revolution. I believe in passive resistance. I believe in the individualistic concept of property when utilized correctly. That is not to say that I do not connect with the collective anarchism as well. I also advocate for the economic theory of mutualism, which I founded myself. Mutualism is where individuals and democratic workers' associations would trade goods and services on the basis of equality. For example, take a farmer. Because he reaps and sows the crops and tends to the land, he should then in turn have property rights to the land on which he works.
I think that our government's views are taking away the uniqueness of individuals. Amongst these is the abstraction of man, into which all unique individuals are submerged and lost. Man, you see, is not a person, but an ideal, a spook.
Question 5. What things do you value most in society?
Of possession when used in the name of liberation and equality. I believe that the right of property should be treated in the same way as the right of liberty and security among classes. The liberty and security of the rich do not suffer from the liberty and security of the poor. Far from that, they mutually strengthen and sustain each other. The rich man's right of property, on the contrary, has to be continually defended against the poor man's desire for property. I also argue that the right of property contradicted the rights to liberty, security, and equality. If we are associated for the sake of liberty, security, and equality, we are not associated for the sake of property. Then if property is a natural right, this natural right is not social, but antisocial. Property and society are utterly irreconcilable institutions. Since property and its rights are unequal between the rich and the proletariat, they do not work in this world and should not exist altogether. But, instead of inferring therefrom that property should be shared by all, I demand, in the name of general security, its entire...
I value myself. I say, liberate yourself as far as you can, and you have done your part. I also don't value wealth to a great extent, because greed is just one part of the ego. To spend one's life pursuing only that part is to deny all others. He who ventures everything else for one thing, one object, one will, one passion, is ruled by a passion to which he brings the rest as sacrifices.
Well, I can most certainly tell you that I do not value money or capitalism. From my work, The Capitalist System, I can tell you this. The worker sells his person and his liberty, and his contract constitutes a sort of voluntary and transitory serfdom.
Final question. You are about to eat a cookie and someone steals it and eats it too. How would you deal with them?
I would sit them down and rationally discuss the consequences of them stealing my property. Then I would leave them for some time to reflect on the wrongs they have committed, not just to me, but to all of society, because violence is never the answer.
I have stressed before, property is theft! Property today is used to further tyranny, and institutions that charge loans, rent, and interest are the very reason the proletariat is oppressed. Although it is very unlikely in our current society, self-sufficient anarchism based on mutualist economic theory is the only way to liberate mankind.
Private property leads to exploitation and oppression. Rather, we should have a voluntary agreement based on a mutual respect for what people actually use. Whoever knows how to take and to defend the thing from him. How to take and to defend the thing. Ooh, the thing. Okay, we'll just keep going. Private property leads to exploitation and oppression. Rather, we should have a voluntary agreement based on a mutual respect for what people actually use. Whoever knows how to take and defend the thing, to him it belongs until it is again taken from him, as liberty belongs to him who takes it. Therefore, if someone was able to take my cookie, it would be rightfully theirs.
Burn down their house. Now, don't get me wrong. Even though I am one of the main proponents of the propaganda of the deed, I am not advocating for murder or senseless violence. I instead believe in violence against institutions. It is through these actions that we are able to obtain our ideal world.
And last but not least, our evening wear competition. It's been a close race, folks, but our judges have had time to deliberate, and they have found our two contestants that are most ideologically compatible. Take it away, judges!
So, what are your thoughts on Bakunin?
Well, I think he's just a little too different. I mean, it's so collective and
He's pretty violent. None of the other people really advocate that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, his dress, it was okay, but it wasn't top notch.
I would agree there too.
Okay. Is that it? Okay, thoughts on Prohan?
Well, he's still collective. He's a collective anarchist, which isn't really the same as the other side. But, he doesn't advocate for violence, which is always a plus.
Yeah.
And the makeup was a little trashy.
I agree.
It's true.
And, like, that whole mutualism aspect, like, I think that's what, like, set it apart from not being the loser, but not good enough to be the winner yet.
Yeah, I would agree.
So what do you guys think about Godwin?
He's pretty, like, standard. He's an individualistic, believes that people can run their own government, so I think it's a high up there.
Yeah, I thought he was just kind of wishy-washy. I mean, he didn't really take firm stances on things.
And that fall at the beginning, I had to dock at least 10,000 points. I know.
So then I guess that just leaves our two winners, Sterner and Belagaria.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough call. They're both very individualistic. They're non-violent.
Yeah, if you were to put them on an anarchist spectrum, they'd be relatively close together. And they both don't like private property. I'd be pretty confident in saying it's a tie.
Yeah. And I mean, those Gucci and Chanel shoes.
Oh, yeah.
I gave them like 30,000 points for those. Yeah.
I think there were a lot of continuities and changes between the two sides and the two time periods. Continuity-wise, both didn't like private property, and also both wanted the abolition of the state. But there were some changes, like going more towards a collectivist spectrum with like Bakunin and stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I would say possibly a reason for the changes is the Industrial Revolution was leading up to the second column, and here collective anarchists were focused more on the means of production, which would have been a much bigger problem after the Industrial Revolution. And this Industrial Revolution could have set the stage for a more change in their priorities. Also, with the growth of population, with more people, there was more exploitation in factories, which is maybe why there was a shift towards the workers controlling the means of production.
Okay, well, I think, for the Revolution 1789, both time periods were obviously had a distrust of the government, and it makes sense that people in both columns are seeking to abolish the state in search of better organization.
That's all, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to the 227th annual Miss Anarchist. We hope you had just as much fun as we did. We now return you to your regularly scheduled 2016 presidential debate.
I have much better judgment than she does. There's no question about that. I also have a much better temperament than she has. I have a much better. Let me tell you, she spent hundreds of millions of dollars.